As coaches, we know that some of the biggest hurdles to our team's success can come from off the field. Your team needs support to tackle the endless list of expenses, uniforms, training equipment, travel, and more. But raising that money can feel like a full-time job. Thankfully, there's Vertical Raise. Vertical Raise is the premier online fundraising platform using innovative technology to create the easiest and most efficient system available. Raise more money in less time with a local fundraising coach who works with your team every step of the way to customize the ideal fundraiser. With options for online donations, digital discount cards, premium product sales, and even spirit shops, Vertical Raise has top-of-the-line solutions for every fundraising style. To find out more, visit verticalraise.com and we'll get you connected with an exclusive offer on your first fundraiser. All coaches aspire to be champions, and this time of year is when you set that vision for your team. By now, listeners of this podcast know about signature championship rings and have met some of the signature champion coaches who partner with them to celebrate their achievements. Reputable, affordable, first-class customer service are just some of the ways we keep hearing coaches describe signature championship rings. So as you're ramping up this summer for the upcoming season, create a championship vision for your team now using the design tool at signaturechampions.com/podcast. Give your team a visual to motivate their pursuit of a championship in 2024. And when your team has a championship moment to celebrate, we highly recommend consulting with Signature Championship Rings.
Being as simple as you can was a big emphasis with the players, and with that just comes they can execute it immediately. They know exactly what they're doing. There's no hesitation, and if you can eliminate that as much as possible, you'll be a step faster.
In this episode of Coaching Coordinator Podcast presented by Vertical Raise, we sit down with Cody Leach at the Leo Seal football facility at Mississippi State. Cody shares his insight on his journey in football, which was influenced by his father's core team values. He discusses transitioning from defense to special teams, highlighting the importance of skill adaptation. Cody reflects on his unconventional entry into football, learning the air raid offense, and simplifying strategies for player success. We explore career decisions in coaching, evolving coaching styles, and crafting unique coaching identities, all weaved in with some ideas and stories he shares about his father, Mike Leach. Cody was a presenter at last year's National Air Raid Convention, and we're excited to be hosting the 2024 National Air Raid Convention One-Back Edition. The clinic begins on June 25th. The highlight of this year's clinic is the Originator Series, which is presentations by the coaches who created offenses that have been the foundation of many variations that have sprouted up in the game. Come and learn from June Jones, the originator of the run and shoot, Noel Mazzoni, the originator of the end zone offense, Art Briles and his unique spread offense, and of course, the godfather of the air raid, Hal Mumme. This clinic has been in person in the past, but this year it will be presented virtually, and you can get your ticket at 2024airraid.coachesclinic.com. The link is in the show notes. Here's my conversation with Cody Leach, Special Teams Fellow at Mississippi State. I've always been interested in the use of technology to make our jobs more effective. So I'm excited to continue sharing modern football technology with you here on the podcast. This innovative system leverages tendencies to improve self-scouting, game planning, and in-game decision-making at the speed of the game. Modern football stands out because it's a battle-tested platform used by teams at all levels, like four-time national champion Bishop Gorman, the five-time California state champion Folsom Bulldogs, six-time Texas state champion Lake Travis, Cal football, and the CFL's Grey Cup champions, the Montreal Alouettes. So book a demo today to see why these teams trust modern football technology. Visit www.teammofo.com/demo and mention Coaching Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code CC10 to receive 10% off your first year. All right, so I'm sitting down with Cody Leach at the Leo Seal football facility here in Starkville, Mississippi, at Mississippi State. And the last time I was here at this facility was my daughter's freshman year of college. She was moving in here, and I did come to practice. I think it was pre-COVID, and those guys weren't able to do much, but I stood on the sideline and watched an air raid practice and probably took about 4 pages of notes back at the hotel when I was done. So it was fun to see what an air raid practice looked like. But I'm back here now to move my daughter again. She's graduated and had the opportunity to come and sit down with Cody and talk about where he's at in his career and some of the things he's looking at. So Cody, great to be here with you, and thanks for taking the time.
Good to be here with you and thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah, so it's a nice warm day here in Starkville. We're sitting outside here. So.
It'll be real hot today. The high's 96. Yeah.
So, it's going to be a fun day here moving my daughter in 96 degrees. But as I was mentioning to you before this, I mean, what was fun for me the last time I was out here was not just to see all the things that a Mike Leach air raid team was doing, but seeing how they practice, the how, and how that applies. And, just looking at your background, obviously, growing up, you learned a lot of things. We'll get into your experience in learning the air raid here in a little bit, but what are those things, I guess, made the most impact on you, and just thinking about not how you are as somebody now in the profession, but also just growing up and seeing that it's about how you do things?
So the first thing that came to mind when you asked me that question was all through growing up. So Dad had always had 3 team goals, and they were always the same everywhere he went since Texas Tech. And I'd be curious to ask what they were doing before Texas Tech, but it was be a team, be the most excited to play, and be the best at doing your job. That's it. Every coach has some sort of culture, some sort of thing hanging up so the players can always see it. Those are the things that Dad always had hanging up everywhere. And that's what's been interesting to me is I think a lot of coaches probably evolve and change sort of things here and there as when it comes to building a culture and stuff. But as far as I know, as soon as Dad became a head coach, those were the 3 team goals that he always had everywhere he went. And so growing up, those are the 3 things I always heard and was always around. And that's about as simple as you can boil down what every player should be focusing on in order to be successful. And there's a few words that I think a lot of people can use and can also be successful, but those ones really boiled it down for me that's all you need to be able to focus and have a successful team.
Yes, and so in your football experience, you started on the defensive side of the ball at the BYU, I believe, as a student assistant. You're working with special teams now. You've learned the air raid offense, but your background didn't start there. You started on the defensive side of the ball. You're on the special team side now. When you look at those 3 things and now how you're working in the profession, how are you applying those things within what you do?
Being a part of all 3 sides of the ball, I think has been a pretty unique experience for me in that every side of the ball has skills that translate to everything, especially special teams. Everything you do on offense and defense can be applied directly to what special teams is doing and vice versa. And when I got to BYU, I wasn't expecting that I would be starting on the defensive side because obviously Coach Kalani Sitake, he knew who my dad was and what I was kind of leaning towards, but he felt that it would be a good way for me to, obviously I'm going to be hitting offense sometime, and so getting some defense experience and seeing what they're looking at, what they're doing, what they notice offense is doing, I think helps me in the long run.
So we mentioned learning the air raid offense, and I found it interesting. That wasn't initially the thought for you. It was I'm going to get into football, I'm going to learn the air raid offense. Where did things start for you? And I guess, how did you get to this point where you are coaching?
Okay, so this is another thing that I guess I don't really know, but I feel like is kind of unique to me as a coach's kid. I think most coaches' kids, and I guess I'd wonder what your experience is with it, but I think most coaches' kids do get into football and they get into their dad's job a lot and they really like it. When I was growing up, I didn't really want anything to do with football. So when we were at Texas Tech growing up, Dad would bring me to the office. But I'm not there watching practice oh, this is awesome. I love practice. I love watching practice. And I'm also short, so I'm on the sidelines and I can't really see anything. So, whatever practice is going on, I'm in the players' lounge just playing video games, and that was it. And so growing up, I went to all the games. They're a lot of fun to watch. I loved watching Dad's team succeed and do everything that they did and how much fun he had with that. But I, for whatever reason, was not particularly into football or like the little intricacies of it or learning it very specifically. Even though now, looking back, we know Dad's one of the greatest college football innovators of all time, and all of the stuff that he and Hal did are now used everywhere, NFL, high school. But I didn't come to realize how cool that was and that I wanted to do that until I got to college. And when I first got there, I was like, the first thing, I didn't know what I wanted to be still. I think most college kids do freshman year. But I knew I liked exercise, I liked learning about the body and how that all works. And I actually got to take some really cool anatomy classes, which are the coolest thing ever because, you always see what's on the surface of people, but the stuff inside of you is so cool. But anyways, halfway through college, I think to myself, I'm like, I got to make sure that football isn't something I'm interested in. And so I had a buddy who worked with BYU's sports marketing team, and he was like, my boss talks to Kalani a lot, and I could see if he can help me get you a job there, because BYU would send out these emails to all the students, be like, student jobs, you got to get a student job. Here's the list of student jobs that we have available. And I'd go down that list, and there's nothing for like sports, or I didn't see anything for like football specifically. So I was like, how do I get in this? And so my buddy hooked me up, and Kalani had talked to my dad, and Kalani hooked me up with a spot on defense as their student assistant. And I worked with cornerbacks, and I worked with Coach Gennaro Guilford, and he's still there now as their cornerbacks coach. And it was a really cool experience. They even let me call out plays, which was really cool, from the sidelines. So like I'd have the headphones on, and I'd get to call out plays. It was super cool. A really cool experience.
I think the other part of it I found interesting is, so you'd make that decision of, boy, I really want to explore this and find out, is this something I want to do? That, as I said, you didn't know the air raid. So your source for the air raid offense, you went to Hal.
Yeah, so right, I had my dad. It was, big famous football coach, great offense, great offensive mind. And so growing up, since I wasn't that super interested into football or learning the specifics of it, or like learning explicitly air raid stuff from Dad, I hadn't had any exposure to it until after BYU. And after I'd graduated there, then I came to Mississippi State with Dad as an offensive GA. And I was here in 2022. So for his whole last season, I was there and I learned it. But after that, right, because I'm assuming that Dad's going to be around a while. And so I was like, I still have some time. And then everything happened in December. But just watching film is tough if you don't know what you're looking for or what the intricacies are. And I still know a lot of, like I have all those offensive guys that were with Dad last year, Spurrier Jr., Mason Miller, Drew Hollingshead, Jason Washington, and I got all their numbers and stuff, but I needed someone that, like, a way that I could, like, have someone teach me it without, like, inconveniencing them too much.
Right.
And that worked out perfectly with the Air Raid Certified. And so after Dad had passed, I'd called and talked to Hal a bit, and he helped hook me up with taking the course, and I went through that whole thing, and it was really cool. They actually have like a bunch of extra film at the end of it. So like after you do all the courses and stuff, they also just have a bunch of extra like offenses that ran air raid stuff. And usually they're either like Hal's or Dad's or Dana Holgerson's offenses. And it was cool to be able to like go through all that after having been taught some of the intricacies and stuff from the course itself.
Yeah, I thought what was interesting as we were talking before this got going, one, that it was Air Raid certified, that kind of gave you like that foundation, as you said. But I think the secret sauce really in anything, you look at the digital world today and what we've been doing, my work with Coach Tube, my work with all the clinics that I do, even the podcast. I mean, there's a lot you can learn. But ultimately, the secret sauce is being able to go and talk to somebody in person, could be on Zoom, and being able to pick their brain and fill in the gaps. There's always going to be some gaps. I mean, as much detail as you could get in some of that, there's going to be gaps. There's things you want to know. There's situations you want to apply it to. And so for you, that list of people you have, Hal, all these other guys who have been involved with the Air Raid offense, being able to talk to them, clinic with them, is a valuable part of this as well. So I think I look at coach education today, yes, the digital side has really advanced us. The knowledge is out there way more than it's ever been, but you can't discount actually learning from people as well.
For sure. Another thing that helped me learn more about it was YouTube. And there's a lot of guys, since Dad's offense is so prolific, that there's a lot of guys who've covered a lot of stuff on there. A lot of their stuff is pretty good. So yeah, technology, we're definitely in a world that's so different from like when Dad was growing up that it's so much easier for information to be found and applied. It's crazy.
Cody, looking at what you're doing now, working with Cliff Odom here at Mississippi State last year, you worked with Eric Mealy, who's now at North Carolina, two great special teams minds. You've learned some air raid, you learned some defense. You did spend that year with Eric last year. But now's the opportunity to take what you've learned and start applying that mindset, those things you learned, the skills of, hey, let's simplify it. Let's look at the details and make sure we're sound on those things. Now, looking at special team side of the ball, how does this, I guess, fold into what you're doing right now?
So, first of all, I love that simplify thing for a lot of things. You know, Dad and Hal had always believed that the biggest problem with football during their time going through their careers was that people had too many plays and that it's confusing the guys. It's so much stuff that they have to learn that it makes it hard for them to immediately execute as soon as they get a sign, as soon as they get a signal, this is what we're doing, go. And so in that aspect, that's something that it's something that every coach kind of has to figure out, that balance of, well, if we have a lot of plays, they have to prepare for a lot of stuff. But if you can make it as simple as possible for your players, there's a trade-off between, we have so many plays, we're sophisticated, they have to prepare for it, but also, you have to get set a little longer. And then the opposite side of being simpler and being able to just go out and execute. And so when I think of that, as far as special teams go, and with how Coach Mealy had run things, being as simple as you can was a big emphasis with the players. And with that just comes, they can execute it immediately. They know exactly what they're doing. There's no hesitation. And if you can eliminate that as much as possible, you'll be a step faster. And when it comes to special teams itself, for example, like this year for drills, we had a progression for spring, especially when we were installing this new kind of special teams unit that we're doing. And there's a progression from step by step of working simpler stuff, so simpler drills, and be able to apply that to bigger plays as we get all of the units all together, all the players on one side of the field, and being able to go out and run a whole play together and getting those guys exactly where we need. Coach Odom's emphasized a lot how important technique is and how important getting the simple fundamentals down, because those things are the things that take no talent to be able to do. Just getting down exactly what you need to do, and as long as you focus on that, there'll be no problem. I like this sticker on the back of your computer that we talked about before this called 20 square feet. And you know a little more about that, but it's this guy who helps explain like how to build culture and within a program. And it was just about how if you're in charge of your 20 square feet, then you got it. And same with Dad, be the best at doing your job. And that's it. If you can do that, everything else is going to fall into place.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
I see specifically when we look at special teams, we always say it's a third of the game, but it isn't a third of the snaps out there. It certainly is not a third of the practice time. So you better be efficient. You better know, like, here's the things we need to run and get better at. As you said, you could do a million things. But when you look at, and here in clinics, the guys who are at the top of whatever category, I could think specifically of, one of the clinics we did this past year, D3, Carnegie Mellon was the best in the country at blocking punts, and Jeff Simmons talked about that, and it wasn't that he had more scheme, it's that he had put more attention into the details and how they taught it too, right? There's the method to it all, right? When you watch an air raid practice, again, coming out here and just seeing how that was orchestrated. Football is football, but I could say that the organization of it and the way things transitioned from one to another was just really, I thought, well thought out, and did get into the details and did give guys the reps they needed and work on some things in small parts. Like, I can remember specifically that day, the receivers were working basically one-on-ones against defensive backs within a small space, about a 10-yard area. I mean, the objective was to win your leverage, or if you're going over the top, to get them stacked before that 10 yards. And obviously the defender was working his technique. But what I thought was interesting and different is there was no ball. And because that was a different part of it, we wanted to focus right here. And the amount of reps that were done, I think in about a 5-minute period, I can't remember how long we spent there, but it was short, was all these guys got their reps. You didn't wear out their legs because they are running all over the place when they're running offense and defense, and there's quite a bit of team. But they worked on those skills. They worked in rapid progression. Because there was no ball, there were multiple lines where you look at one-on-ones. Usually it's a guy on one side of the field and a guy on the other, and you go back and forth. Like, eliminated those things, really focused on this is what we want out of this particular drill to teach these skills. And I know that's something, when I watched Eric on special teams that day, I saw that carry over to that too. Like, Eric is obviously an air raid coach as well, coached running backs in the air raid offense. So he understands that, but certainly you saw that application to, all right, we're going to take this mentality, we're going to take this idea of it's about how we do it and apply it to special teams.
Yeah. You reminded me of another aspect of special teams practice, and yeah, you don't get a lot of time with those guys to run special teams. It'll obviously depend on your coach on how much you can get, but most of the time, yeah, you're right. We don't get a third of the snaps, but it's special teams is as important as the other sides of the ball. And it also reminded me of how, yeah, we get a lot of reps for certain drills, and thank your video coordinators because they have to shuffle over for every single rep and get all of those reps and fit them all in. So they're getting plenty of exercise out there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, looking at a couple of things, you and I, before we got going, we were just talking about career path and the different ways guys go about this. And when you look at the air raid guys, right, you look at the beginning of this with Hal and Mike and then all the other guys who have come along this, they've learned things a certain way, but they've spent time with people who, in doing that way, has helped their career. And I know we've kind of gotten into an era where we see guys want to get that title as fast as possible, but I think it shows the value of being with the right people. And as you look at, I guess, where you want to go with your career, what is your approach? I guess, what have you been able to learn from this, and just thinking about this is probably the best way to approach developing myself as a coach?
So that is a question that I've been asking myself a lot. And that's one of those other things where it's like, well, I wish I could ask Dad, which he does have a lot of advice. He's one of those guys who now it's like I'm really thankful that he was so famous, and I think that's a huge blessing for me is that since he was so famous, I mean, he's filmed all the time. There's video of him all over the place, and it's so easy to find him. So I can get a lot of advice through there. But yeah, so since I haven't had him and I've been thinking about it so much, as I've been meeting a bunch of coaches, you know, all of the guys Dad's worked with in the past, guys that I've met at past AFCA conferences, I've asked a lot of guys, a lot of coaches, what they think I should do and what the next step for me is. And it usually goes in one of two ways. Okay, I've asked them this specific question. I asked them all, do you think it would be better if I went down a division or two and became a position coach? Or should I try to stay D1 and keep in these analyst, GA, fellow type positions until I get promoted to a position in D1 college? And I was really hoping that with all these coaches, I'd be able to get a straight answer. But, you know, averaging out all their answers, it's still like 50-50 what I should do. Because, you know, there's pluses and minuses. If you go down a division, you get a lot of hands-on experience. You get to run your own room, which is a huge deal, no matter what division it is. But then I've also been told by some coaches that if you do that sometimes, they've known guys who just get stuck, and they just get stuck in that division. They can't get out of it. And then if you stay in D1, whatever the job is, you won't be stuck. You might not run your own room for a little bit, but you'll still be able to be in the best division of football that college can offer. So it's something that I've been having to do a lot of thinking about. And now I know a lot of guys who are D1 coaches, and I think if I did like straight up ask them for position, I think they could have something for me to do. But I almost am like, this is another like growing thing for me, and like something that I wish I could ask Dad about, but I'm like, do you just like go up and ask a guy, hey, can I have a job? It feels so awkward to just go straight up and do that. But I don't know. That's something that I'm still thinking about and wondering what possibilities are and what would be the best step for me. Like, I even know some coaches that aren't air raid coaches. They're a defensive guy, but they work with an offensive guy who doesn't run air raid. And I'm like, does it matter who I go to? And then eventually make my own kind of offense, or should I, does it matter if I go work for an air raid guy or a guy who's another good offensive mind? Like, he's had great results and stuff, but it's something that I don't know the answer to yet. And I think a lot of that is just take the step. Yeah,
you keep working along the progression as a coach and learn things. And I think we've had Hal talk about this. You and I talked about this a little bit. When you look at the air raid offense as it was originally designed, and your dad was the one who was still running it, I guess, as purely as it was an air raid offense, that there have been all these other guys who worked with, learned it, influenced by, they evolved to something that was a little bit different. And that's true, I think, in coaching, all of us, wherever we learn. And I think the opportunities, you want to work with the best people, the people who are going to help you grow and develop, the people who you believe in and do things the right way. But ultimately, you're going to take what you've learned and you're going to evolve that in your own way. Even if that stays, the things, a foundation of the air raid. I mean, when you look at, you mentioned your dad and all the videos of him, and I think a lot of coaches out there remember him in different ways, from the funny quips he's had and answers to questions. And thankfully, the media got to learn that, hey, we can ask him some of these goofy questions that we would probably get a coach to walk away from, like, stuff about Halloween candy or what are you having for Thanksgiving, and
he's been coaching football so long. He would rather talk about anything other than football. As soon as he gets home from the office, there's not football on. There's not a football game on. Yeah. Super Bowl is happening. No, he's not watching the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is only on because Mom is a huge football fan. She will watch anything. Anytime football's on, she's watching football. But Dad, no. Yeah, you can ask him anything you want, and he'll answer it, which I think is something that should happen more often.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure it's something when you look at where do I want to go, that's something that has impacted you, that whatever I do eventually, I want it to be mine. I want that uniqueness. I'm not trying to go out and copy-paste somebody else. That your dad had a way of doing things that were uniquely him, and obviously one of the best to coach the game at the college level ever. But for you, I'm sure that's something you aspire to and have learned from.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of things that I think about, like culture-wise. Like, that's something that as a young coach, which maybe I shouldn't waste so much time on it, but I think about as if if I were a head coach, this is what I'm going to do. I think about that culture stuff every once in a while. And as you were talking about like Dad's uniqueness and stuff, which this part's not entirely unique to him, but I thought was really funny, was that every Friday, it doesn't matter, every day before the football game, we're going to a movie. Because Dad's also another guy who not only does he hate committees, he also hates meetings, just to meet. And so for that night before the game, they always go to movies. And I asked Hal about that. I was like, where did that come from? Why does Dad go to movies every Friday? He's like, we did it. I did it. It wasn't hard to convince him to do it because Dad loved movies. And I kind of see the merit in it too because, we haven't done movies since Dad was here. And so you could either go see a movie, which is like hour and a half or two, or you can sit in your hotel room just doing nothing. I'm a big proponent, and if I were a head coach, I'd be bringing movies back again.
I can specifically confirm that your dad wasn't big on committees. I remember I had to, when I was at USA Football, go to and present a little bit at the Pac-12 meeting when he was at Washington State. Yeah. And we were in there for the whole meeting with what we were presenting from USA Football, but I was just so caught up in watching him because he walks into the room as the last guy who came in, brings in a burger and fries, sits down at the table. I have some food? Everybody else is meeting, and he's going to town on his burger and fries. I'm like, this is the most unique individual I've ever seen. Like, you could tell, like, these other guys they had to be here, so they're going to do it. And, and he spoke up and said some things and what he felt when he was there. But, yeah, it was, uniquely him. Well, I thought it was pretty funny. The other experience I had with him is it was the one back convention. We have that coming up here soon, but it was the first year it was virtual. It was during the pandemic, and I believe we caught your dad in Key West, and didn't have his camera on, but could tell he was eating a bowl of syrup.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, he can listen to you in between quips back and forth. So.
He did.
No, yeah.
Well, Cody, I really appreciate you taking the time, sitting down with us, sharing a lot about your dad. Obviously, I know a lot of people hold him in high regard in the profession, but also giving us a peek into how that's influenced you and influencing what you're becoming as a coach. And certainly, best of luck to you along the way, and best of luck to the Bulldogs here in 2024. Hail State.
Hail State. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Here are winning edge takeaways and ideas for implementation. 1. Embrace the fundamentals. Cody emphasizes the importance of mastering the basics. Whether it's special teams, offense, or defense, having a strong foundation in the fundamentals of football is crucial. This not only helps in executing plays effectively, but it also builds credibility and trust with players and your fellow coaches. 2. Learn from every experience. Cody Leach's journey through various coaching roles, from a student assistant at BYU to his current position at Mississippi State, highlights the value of diverse experiences. As a young coach, you should seize every opportunity to learn, whether it's through different coaching positions, working with various teams, or studying under seasoned mentors. Each experience contributes to a well-rounded coaching skill set. And 3, stay committed and adaptable. The coaching profession demands dedication and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Cody Leach's reflections on his father's unexpected passing and how it reinforced his commitment to coaching illustrates the need for resilience. As a young coach, you should be prepared to face challenges head-on, stay adaptable, and remain committed to your goals, even in the face of adversity. Remember to check out our partner, Vertical Raise. They're doing incredible things in the fundraising space. They make it easier for you as the coach, taking everything off of your plate and raising more funds than you have in the past. The link to Vertical Raise is in the show notes. Be sure to check out their offer for our listeners. Remember, the National Air Raid Convention begins on June 25th. There will be replays available as well. You can find the link to that in the show notes. Follow All We're Doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.